الحمد لله ثم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا مولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. All praise is due to Allah, and after that all praise is due to Allah. We thank Him, we seek help from Him, we ask guidance in Him, and we seek forgiveness in Him from our own evils and from our own bad deeds. Anyone who has been guided by Allah, they are being guided, and anyone who has been misguided by Allah, He will never find a guardian to guide them. I bear witness. I bear witness that there is no deity worthy of worship except for Allah, the only one without partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is His servant and His messenger. To proceed forward. So, in the half of the world right now, it's the summertime. And in the summertime, people from all around the world in the northern hemisphere, after spending the winter months usually very, very, in their houses and not really going anywhere, mostly indoors, they use the summertime as an opportunity to get out and travel, to see new places, to visit family, to go to the beach, all those different types of things. And so nothing different, as you make your plans for travel, it's important to be able to formulate an intention as Muslims, to formulate an intention behind your travel. And so it becomes not only just a means of your vacation, but even an act of worship for you. And that's the blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. So in the old times, in fact, even before the invention of the locomotive, people didn't travel for pleasure. It was a very, very difficult thing to do. People, they used to travel, they used to get killed by bandits, or they get looted, or they never made it to their place. I've sometimes used to wonder, why is it that people gave you the title Haji when you came back from Hajj? And the reason why is because most people never made it back. It was such an arduous journey that they sent you off as if you were never going to come back. And if you actually did come back, it was a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought you back, and so you were given the title of Haji. Nowadays, people do this all the time. Hajj is not as important of a title as it used to be before, because of that reason. For other reasons, alhamdulillah, there are many blessings of being able to go for Hajj. So people used to go for business, they used to go for Hajj, obviously, to visit family. And only recently has it become more of a phenomenon that I'm just going to travel long distances for short periods of time just to be able to relax. And in fact, the industry, if you look at the travel industry globally, it's so large that it annually represents about $6.9 trillion worth of expenses. And then makes up about 292 million jobs around the world are just dedicated to this area of travel. Even in Malaysian GDP relies heavily on tourism. So even in our own country, we have this as well. Now, why am I mentioning travel so much, and why am I doing it in the middle of a khutbah? Many times in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's an instruction for us to be able to travel. In fact, 13 times Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, He says, قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ. He says, say to Muhammad, travel through the earth. And for one example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, He says, travel in the earth and see how He began creation. And then Allah will bring forth the creation of the hereafter. Verily, Allah is able to do all things. And in another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, He says, have they not traveled through the land and observed how was the end of those who came before them? And they were greater than them in power. And so many times, 11 more times, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in the Quran itself. And even in modern times, the ability for us to be able to travel is a blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. And it's only for those people, however, who reflect upon it. It's a blessing, and we have to be able to reflect upon it. So traditionally, scholars used to have divided travel into basically two noble intentions. So I'll talk about these two noble intentions in my first khutbah, and then my second one I'll talk a little bit about maybe modern travel, because I think most of the scholars that I'm going to be talking about here, they never even conceptualize this idea that you would be traveling for fun, or you'd be traveling just to relax. I mean, it never really obviously occurred to them. So the first one that they have was noble intention was moving away from what is disliked. So that was the first intention of traveling. And we have people who are doing this even to this day and age. You know, the first one is running away from persecution. So we have refugees, not only in Malaysia, but now traveling to Europe, other parts of the world. They basically are escaping persecution to be able to go and better worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The hijrah was actually done to preserve the religion. The Muslims in the community in Mecca were being persecuted, so the Prophet ﷺ instructed some of the companions to go to Abyssinia. And there was actually 2 migrations that were made to Abyssinia because of the persecution that the Muslims were facing. So that's a noble intention. If you have somewhere that you're being persecuted, then you travel and you move away from that land. Number 2, our second part of this is in Surah Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions many times about this idea of travel. For example, the people of the cave were also fleeing persecution because they were basically not able to practice their religion, right? And Musa, he travels in Surah Kahf, he travels with Khidr. And then also at the same time, you have in the end of it, you have the story of Dhul-Qarnayn, and all he does is travel. So this idea of travel is always there. Why? Why is it there? It's not only for the idea of being able to free the persecution, but also to be able to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I'll get into that a little bit later. The third one is to be able to move for better economic conditions. Better economic conditions. Sufyan al-Thawri, when he was asked why he lived in certain places, this is what he answered. He said, I lived where the prices were the lowest, because that was better for my heart, since concern for the dunya is going to be less. If you're going to live in Singapore and Hong Kong and New York and San Francisco, you're always going to be chasing after your next rent paycheck, because it's so expensive to live there. But however, if you live in a kampung in Malaysia, you might not have as much to worry about. And so this is what Sufyan al-Thawri was saying, that he used to travel to places where where things were a lot less, so he wouldn't have to worry about the dunya and be constantly chasing after it, month after month, year after year, and those type of things. He did it, and most of us, for example, me coming from America, my parents moved to the US for better economic life. And so perfectly legitimate to be able to do that as long as you're able to practice your religion. Number 4 is health reasons as well. That's another reason why you want to be moving away from what is disliked. There's hadith in regards to this. Also, the Prophet ﷺ said that if there's a plague in the land, do not travel to it. If you're in there, then don't leave it either. Now imagine, this is like quarantine. That's what quarantine is all about. That if you're in an area where there's a disease, they basically lock you in. And this is something that 1,400 years ago, the Prophet ﷺ is encouraging us to be able to do. That if you're in an area of plague, you don't leave that area. Because if you do, that's how disease is spread. Right? And if you look in the past, let's say even 15 years, why is it that, for example, swine flu or avian flu, why does it move from different country to different country? It's because people don't heed the Prophet ﷺ advice. When avian flu came about, how did it go from Hong Kong, for example, to China and then to other parts of the world? Because people that were there in the time, you said, I'm not affected. They got on the plane, they moved to another country for travel, whatever it was, and then other people got affected because of it as well. But here the Prophet ﷺ clearly is telling us that if there's a plague in your land, stay put. Don't go anywhere. And in fact, the Prophet ﷺ said that if the plague is in the land and you die, then you will die in a state of what's called murabata. Murabata means permanent, full-time service of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. SubhanAllah. The Prophet ﷺ this is how he's describing it. If you're going to stay put, you're going to die in a plague, then know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of you. You're going to be dying in a state of constant obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that was the first reason why. You're moving away from what is disliked. Number 2 is moving towards something which is liked. Right? So that's the second reason why you would want to be able to travel. The first one of this moving to what is liked is obviously seeking knowledge. Many hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, praising this idea of going out there and seeking knowledge and traveling to be able to do that. In Bukhari, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever follows a path in which he seeks knowledge, Allah will make path for him to paradise. Right? So the knowledge is referred to as if you're on that path, then you're on the path of paradise. And so we have to constantly be thinking about this. Many people do this. I mean, it's not restricted to the religion, the study of the deen. Many people from Malaysia and other parts travel through the other parts of the world to be able to gain knowledge, whether it be in Egypt or in Medina or in the US or in the UK, all of these different types of things. You know, in fact, if you think about it, the entire body of hadith that we have would not have been possible if people weren't willing to travel. Because what the collectors were doing was they were going from one area to another, and if they heard that, you know, so-and-so companion lives in Basra, and he knows of a hadith that I'm trying to search for, they would travel 2-3 months to Basra just to be able to learn that hadith from that person. And then from Basra, he said, oh, you know, there's another one in Sham, in Damashq, that I need to go learn from him. So then they travel another 2 months to be able to get it. So they spend their entire lives traveling for gaining of knowledge. And this body of hadith that we have is because of their traveling that they did. How could Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not put them on the path to paradise if there's so many blessings that we've gained from it, and all generations will continue to gain from their sacrifices of being able to travel? Number 2, as I mentioned earlier, there are Quranic verses that command or encourage us to travel in seeking out what's called ibrah. Ibrah means deriving lessons from the things that we see. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as I mentioned, He says, travel in the earth and see what was the upshot of those who denied. Meaning that, you know, to travel, you're going to see different civilizations and they're going to be destroyed, and you have to reflect on this. Why were they destroyed? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over and over again mentions that He destroyed those civilizations that were lying or didn't tell the truth, or were committing mischief in the earth, didn't believe in Allah, they were associating partners with Him. If you look at the pyramids, the Aztecs, the Mayans, all of these different civilizations that were there, they were great civilizations at the time, and they were the most powerful civilizations at their time. Right? The world was filled with these things, but where are they now? Right? We need to reflect on this, and when we do our tours of the world, then we need to be able to think about these things, and I'll get into this a little bit later. But the second part of this, a reflection that you have to do, is when we go out there and we seek out these civilizations, we think about and we say, I wonder what life was like 1,000 years ago. I wonder what they were doing or what they had. Now imagine 1,000 years from now, what legacy are we going to leave behind? Because this is a part of human nature. It's a science says everything leads towards chaos. So if we have the society now, most likely the idea is it's going to get ruined. You have the buildings that are up, unless you actively do something, it's going to get destroyed. So what is going to happen 1,000 years from now when people come to Kuala Lumpur to be able to look at an ancient civilization of Malaysia? Right? Are they going to say these were seekers of the truth? Right? Or are they going to say that these were the people that built whatever civilization we have now? Or are they going to wipe us out of history and say we never want to remember these people? This is our task in front of us. Is we will decide right here now how we will remember 1,000 years from now. And this is something we really have to be able to think about. Another best benefit of travel is that it tests your akhlaq, your character. The scholars of Arabic have said the reason why the word travel is called safar is because it's related to the word asfar, which means the unveiling. Unveiling means when your true nature begins to come out when you travel. The true nature of a person comes out. In fact, if you ever travel with somebody, you'll begin to realize that. Because you get out of your comfort zone, and then you begin to realize how people are going to react. How people are going to react as your roommate, how people are going to react when it comes to money. All of those things, basically, your veils that you have, that you set up with your friends, begin to slowly crumble, and you begin to be able to do that. You know, people came to Umar al-Khattab, and they said, we recommend so-and-so to be a qadi, a judge. We recommend so-and-so to be a judge. And he asked, Umar al-Khattab, he asked, have you been on a journey with them? And the people replied, they said, no. And then Umar replied, he said, I don't think you actually know. You don't know the person. You haven't traveled with them. So if you really, really want to get to know a person, that's what you have to be able to do. So again, one of the best benefits is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests your character and hopefully what you'll find is that character comes out as being true and more like a diamond rather than a piece of gold. But you can also, travel can fix your akhlaq. It can also fix your character. Think of the story of Musa and his teacher. Right? It's a very, very unique story because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that there's, even in the beginning he says, the instruction, he says, go to the junction of a river, and over there you're going to forget about a fish, and then when you go back you're going to see a person there. And then you go travel with this person. This is basically the story. The Khidr is actually never mentioned in the Quran. It's just some unnamed man that Musa begins to travel with. But how much does he learn from this person? And Musa's akhlaq, his character, begins to develop when he's traveling with this person. Musa's character begins to develop when he leaves Fir'aun and he runs away to Madian. His character is developing, right? All of these things happen from the Quran. So, and not only this, but Musa, he failed in his attempt to travel with Khidr. Because Khidr says, you know what, that's it. I'm done with you now. You've asked me way too many questions, even I told you not to ask me. And so even Musa couldn't do it. So his again, the unveiling happened even with Musa, that he couldn't be able to keep quiet whenever Khidr was doing such and such, and therefore. And the last one that I want to mention in regards to this, there was one of the Tabi'in, he was Bishr al-Hafi, he said, at the time that he was living, the Quran reciters had become very complacent during his time. So he mentioned to them, and he said, "Oh, Quran reciters, travel and you will become sweeter, because water becomes purified when it is moving. Water becomes purified when it is moving." I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us travelers in this world, literally and figuratively. Literally meaning that we really literally travel in the world to be able to see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created and destroyed, but figuratively also, the Prophet ﷺ said that we're all travelers in this world. We're coming here, we're stopping underneath a tree, and eventually we're going to go on, we're going to go to the hereafter. So figuratively and realistically, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make all of us travelers that benefit from His creation, and we end up traveling straight towards Jannah. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر ولكم واستغفروه. الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. Brothers, it's actually raining outside, so if you guys can just move up a little bit forward. There's people standing, I think, maybe in the rain. So even if you see carpet in front of you, just move up. Inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make the room for us when we begin to pray. So I'll make this really quick because I know people are really wet and I don't want to complain forever. So in the first khutbah, what I mentioned was that traditionally scholars have divided their travel into two noble intentions. The first one being moving away from what is disliked, and the second one was moving towards what is liked. And I think in the modern age, we can add a third category to this area. And if it's done properly, then we can actually do that. And that is that as you begin to make your summer plans, you begin to make your plans for family vacations, remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, 13 times in the Quran mentions Siru fil ard, travel through the earth. And I think you know by now that I'm not a person that stands up here for your khutbahs and tells you what to do and what not to do. You're going to end up doing whatever it is you're going to do. And if travel is coming to you with something you're going to do, alhamdulillah. My goal is to be able to make that travel that you do an ibadah for you. I'm just going to try to frame it in such a way that that mundane thing that you're going to be doing is going to become an act of worship. And inshallah, in the act of doing that, maybe I can get some benefit as well. So that is my intention of being able to do that. So how do we make travel that worship? If you're going sightseeing, whether it's for Petra, Borobudur, Angkor Wat, the Colosseum, the Pantheon, all of these different things, while looking at these places, we have to be able to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says in the Quran, He says, "Go all over the earth, and behold what happened in the end to those who gave lie to the truth." That means they denied, they were kafir, they denied whatever the truth was. Right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent people of old, they sent Him messengers over and over again, and when they did not believe the messengers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them. Many of them, we don't even see their remains because we don't know where they are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that for the people of Lut, He took the lowest part and made it into the highest part. Meaning He took that entire city and turned it upside down. The lowest part became the highest part, and the highest became the lowest. We don't have, and so a lot of the empires that were there that were giving these messengers, we don't have a clue as to exactly where they are in this world. But it is something that we have to be able to reflect upon. Now, you also, right, that if you're going on vacation to relax at a beach, to go scuba diving, snorkeling, climbing a mountain, whatever it is, we can also reflect upon one of the verses of Allah, right, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, have they then never journeyed about the earth, letting their hearts gain wisdom, and causing their ears to hear? Yet verily, it is not their eyes that have become blind, but blind have become their hearts that are in their breasts. It's a powerful ayah if you really think about this. Right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is basically telling us that the way you gain wisdom is to be able to travel and see whatever else is around you. So for example, when you go, for example, if you're going scuba diving, and you go down into the water, and you see the magnificent creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all the many different colors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, if you don't say subhanallah at that time, then this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, is you blind. He's not talking about the blind of the eye, he's talking about the blind of the heart. You'll see him and you won't even recognize exactly what a beautiful creation Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. But the person who does understand, who sees from his heart, as soon as he sees this creation, will say subhanallah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created things that we're not even aware of yet. Not only in this earth, but also in outer space. Many, many different things. So we have to, whenever we travel, even if it's to a beach, where we're sitting there and a starfish maybe comes up on the shore, or a crab basically is walking sideways. You have to look at that and be able to marvel at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. And you have to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during that time. And the third thing that I wanted to mention lastly is that in the idea of travel we have a great blessing. And that is that the dua of a traveler is one thing that's answered. And that is a great blessing if you think about it. Right? That's why people, they genuinely tell you, oh, you're going on a journey, please make dua for me. This is not a meaningless thing. The Prophet ﷺ said, the person who's on a journey, his dua is mustajab, is accepted. Right? So that's a great blessing for us, that whenever we're traveling, just constantly be in dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether it be for yourself, your family, your friends, your neighbors, whatever it is, for the ummah, for the country, whatever it is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer your prayers. And also one of the benefits, so one of the things that I remember talking to somebody, they said they were going back for Eid Hari Raya a few years back, and they were leaving on the night of Laylatul Qadr, and they were going back to the US. And I said to them, well, why are you leaving on Laylatul Qadr? He said, brother, if I travel from here to London, my night becomes more than 12 hours. So I have more time to be able to make dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see the difference? That the normal person would basically be like, what is the shortest distance for me to get to the US? And most likely they would have chosen the route from here across the Pacific, which mostly means you're going to be in daylight hours. But this person actually decided to go the longer route, so there can be his longer Laylatul Qadr, and so he can benefit from the dua that he made. Not only that he was going to get an answer because he's traveling, but also because he was able to benefit from the night of power as long as possible. These are the benefits that we have towards the travel. And why I'm mentioning this to you is that you probably know by the number of times I give khutbah that I travel a lot. And so these are the types of things that I think about when I'm traveling, whether it be for business, whether it be for pleasure, those type of things. I have this what's called a traveler's itch. If I stay in a city or a country too long, within 2 weeks or so, I get this kind of scratch that says, ooh, I better go somewhere. And one of the reasons why is because of this idea. I tell people, it's like, they ask me why I travel so much. I said, well, Allah commands it for me. He tells me, go travel through the earth. Alhamdulillah. So it's one of those things that if you're going to do it, if you do it for business, if you do it for pleasure, whatever it is that you do it for, make it an ibadah. That rather than just something that you have to do for whatever it is that you're actually doing. And when you travel, you get to learn about how Allah creates life and how He destroys it. And if He can do that, then obviously, why would He not be able to resurrect us on the day of judgment? And the one last thing that I wanted to mention, inshallah, in this regard, as you know, is that traveling to me, and right before I do it, it's actually very, very similar, in my opinion, to the journey of death. Now you say, why is that? When I travel, especially for long distances, right before I begin to travel, I get very anxious. A few hours before that, I get very, very anxious. And especially if it's a long one or a hard one, I think about how difficult that journey is going to be. And if I've never been there, then I begin to read a little bit more about it, know exactly what I'm doing. Here's my hotel room. here's the car, how do I get from the airport to the hotel? I'd plan all of these different things out. And you can do that now with the internet. Right? And and I think to myself sometimes, how is this any different than death? Because as the angel of Malik al-Maut comes to you, you are going to get anxious about what is going to be the hereafter. And that journey that you're going to have between the time that he comes and takes your soul to the life of the grave, until on the day of judgment, until you get to your final destination, which inshallah for every single one of us here in this gathering is going to be Jannah. Until we get there, we don't know our situation. And so there's an anxiety there, there's a difficulty in having the life of the grave, and so those type of things. But how do we prepare for it? How do we know where it is that we're going? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in the Quran very clear description of exactly what we'll be facing. And even in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ gives us very clear descriptions of how the angel of death will come, what will happen in the grave, what will happen on the day of judgment, what will happen in the hereafter. Everything is very clear. So what we have to do is we have to firmly internalize it, visualize it, because we're reading it, we can visualize it within our minds, and then from there have absolute certainty that this is our destination. So when you travel, think about death as well. When you travel, think about death and how your journey is going to be, and not journey to the unknown. We know exactly what's going to happen. It's our own faith that maybe begins to question what is it that's going to happen to us after death. But in reality, we know exactly what it's going to be. So I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who He makes easy for us our journey. Not only in this life, but the hereafter as well. Easy for us, our taking, our death. Easy for us, our hayat al-qabr, life of the grave. Easy for us, our yawm al-qiyamah, on the day of resurrection. And He grants us the highest of paradise, and to be one with the Prophet ﷺ in Jannatul Firdaus.